Welcome to Behind the Mask in Conversation with. Behind the Mask is a neurodivergent focused podcast that aims to offer support, knowledge, understanding, and most importantly, exposure to the neurodivergent community. If you are here, firstly, I hope you enjoy the episode. And lastly, if you are enjoying it, please like, follow, share, and subscribe because your support with this podcast can really help us push the message out. Keep being amazing all, and thank you.
Hello.
Hey, I do, mate. You're right.
I'm all right, mate. How are you getting on?
I'm all right. I've put my glasses on. I thought I'd try and look intelligent.
Shall I go get my blue light glasses?
How can I pull back from? Like, it's been downhill since Thursday, mate. So I had the diary mishap Thursday. Friday, I fell down some stairs because I was too busy watching two flies. So I just literally fell. And then yesterday, I clapped someone round the back of the head at a gig because my brain hadn't processed. Everyone else had stood up except the people in front of me. So as I've gone to give a bit of a clap, I've literally just clattered around the head. And today, I've pulled a hanging kebab over me in the middle of a packed restaurant.
So it's been a week.
Welcome to my world. I'm just my mate just went, do you think you're getting more clumsy because you're unmasking a bit? I was like, no, I'm just like, I am a walking disaster. And if you're gonna bring food out with enough apparatus on it to retile your roof, then there's gonna be trouble. Like,
you're asking for it, really, aren't you?
This is. Oh, good. How are you, mate? You good?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. It's been busy
feeling?
at work, so I'm a bit tired.
I know you texted me earlier saying it absolutely knackered.
Yeah.
Have you been busy, or have you just wound down too much that you're like?
No, so we were in London last week for an expo, so it was a very busy couple of days, and then obviously the traveling and everything, and then it's been very busy at work since then because there was a lot of like calls and leads that we got booked in. So yeah, it's been just a bit full on this week, but no, I'm all good.
So you're a victim of your own success, then?
Pretty much, mate. Yeah.
I like that. It's often
I'll use that going forward. Yeah.
It's so often the case. Like you put so much into something, and then you knacker yourself out putting the momentum into it, and then when you got to catch the positive that comes off the back of it, you're like, I've got no space. Can't occupy this.
I still need to go to sleep.
Yeah, man. No, well, thank you for jumping on, mate. I know that lives are new to you. You've been creating for some time.
Yeah.
And I know you started doing lives and whatnot, so I appreciate you coming on, mate.
Yeah, good, man. Thanks for having me.
So, just so we've got a cut point when I download this and upload it. So, for anyone joining us, this is Behind the Mask. It's a neurodivergent podcast made by neurodivergent people for neurodivergent people. So, varied episodes will feature either neurodivergent creators, individuals. We've had doctors, we've had nutritionists, and the whole idea is to raise knowledge, awareness, understanding, and visibility. I feel like I've said that before. So today, we're joined by Chris. Now, Chris it's one of them, and I know Greg said similar to you. I think when I started my ADHD journey, you were very much prominent. There was you, Nush, and a couple of others that were flying the flag, and we were I was looking in from a distance. And it's really weird when you come into this space pre-diagnosis. It's like, I want to be part of it, but I'm not yet qualified. And then all of a sudden you realize it's just people who are ultimately trying to do the same thing and support the same people.
Yeah.
So to be here now doing this with you, mate, it's an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, mate. It's just people having conversations with other people, isn't it?
Absolutely. So for those of people that don't know Chris, do you want to introduce yourself? Talk us. Who are you?
Yeah.
Tell me about you.
The question of all questions. So yeah, I'm Chris. I'm from Leeds. I'm now living in Ireland. Got diagnosed a couple of years ago, and as Paul said, I was going to call you Greg then. Mine's all over the place. As Paul said there, I've been creating over the last couple of years, kind of used creation as a way to process my own diagnosis journey and kind of find my way through that and try help people along the way. So yeah, that's a brief summary of how we've got to here, I guess.
Jen's just put in the comment, "Oh my God, I forgot you in Ireland." She's absolutely chomping at the bit to make contact with other Irish people.
Yeah.
But basically, Jen, what we thought was because you haven't got enough neurodivergent people, we started shipping them in to offer you support. Chris was the first, and we've got stage 3 and 4 soon. So we're
The
bringing
rollout's
more
on
over to you.
the
We're
way.
taking over. So ADHD and neurodivergence and things like that. Then, so you mentioned a couple of years ago that you got diagnosed, and we'll kind of explore the journey to that and stuff. But let's
Mm.
strip this right the way back then. So, little Chris, as a child, so what did that look like? So, what was your experience as a child? How were you as a young, not we now know undiagnosed? How
Mm.
was that for you? Talk us through that.
Well, I didn't have trouble in school in terms of like the learning side of things. I know a lot of people really struggle when they're in even as young as primary school. It's quite a difficult time being able to like absorb the information and sort of participate in class. I never really had that problem. Like I always got on quite well with picking information up and going into exam settings and that kind of thing. So I think that's a big part of the reason it didn't get picked up until later in life was because I wasn't like struggling academically as such. But a lot of my report cards would used to say spends too much time distracting others, off and off in his own world, and can be a bit disruptive because of that. So I was definitely a bit of a class clown at times, and I think it'd depend on how engaging the subject was or the teacher, especially if I had a teacher that hadn't really gripped me, then I'd definitely be off messing around and trying to find some fun elsewhere. So, but yeah.
And how about like on the family side of things? Like what has your parents kind of said? Because obviously part of the journey is reflecting and going back and kind of trying to build a picture and stuff.
Yeah. So I think it was quite obvious that I was the first in my family that wasn't neurotypical. I think they probably found it quite challenging at times, especially the emotional side of things and the sensitivity. I think it was the first one that they'd really come across. So I've got two older brothers and a younger sister, and I think my two older brothers are very different to me in that sense. So I think that was quite a challenge for them. So it was definitely something new that they were trying to contend with. But my younger sister, she's like my twin, also diagnosed ADHD a little bit after me. So yeah, you can kind of see how the the genes have presented themselves.
And it's like there's only me and my brother, and like we're now realizing we're both riddled. Like when I first got looking into it and stuff, my brother was like, "Nah, I ain't got ADHD." He has like as in him. And then about 4 months into it, he texts me and he just went riddled. Like we're all cursed, and it's weird. Like I always touch on the parent side of things because quite often, um, it's kind of like our parents only know a certain type of child. Like my mum and dad had 2 children, so they only know neurodivergent children. So that the
Mm.
benchmark is me or my brother, and we're both absolutely ripe at the seams with it. So it's interesting to hear that you've got that split in your family, and there's
Mm.
yourself and your younger sister who are neurodivergent,
Yeah.
and your older brothers. How did you find that then? So if you were the softer child and the more emotional and kind of things hit you deeper, which quite often they do with us, how did you find that having two older brothers? Because I imagine having two brothers that potentially were exuding this togetherness and masculinity and stuff, and then
Yeah.
we're soft as shit. Like, how was that you growing up and kind of having that as your benchmark?
Well, I think that's probably a big part of where the masking started. It was, oh, it's not okay to be this sensitive. I need to be more like them. So I always felt this need to be more like my brothers, which meant a 4 or 5 year age jump. So it was like, right, so I need to be less like a child. I need to be more in control of my emotions, and I need to be more put together like they are. So I think that was really a big factor in starting to adopt the mask and kind of not behave the way that I felt or needed I should be behaving. So it was like that's where I started being like, I'll be more like them, I'll be more like this, less like that. And yeah, it did have a big impact in that sense. And I think a lot of people, they look back and it's like, I don't feel like I really got to be a child, where I was always trying to be older than I was. So I didn't go through that development process that I needed to go through, because it was always looking up, looking ahead. Like, I need to be more like that, so I'll just skip ahead, and I'll ignore that stuff. So yeah, it did have a big impact for sure.
And how was you as a child relation to like friendship circles and things like that?
Mm.
Like how did that sit with you?
I was quite frequently in between different friendship groups, so it wasn't that I was, cast out altogether. But I think I'd be with a group for a certain amount of time, and then RSD is probably a big factor, where maybe someone would interpret something the wrong way, and it's like, oh well, that group don't really like me anymore, so I'll kind of see where else I can go, and then it'd be the same thing, kind of bouncing between a few different groups over the years. So it wasn't really until I went to sixth form and met a new group of people that I found like a consistent friendship group. So it was tough, young. You always feel as though you're the odd one out. Like when you're walking down the path, I'm the one that's on the grass verge, or I'm the one that's on the street because they're taking up the path. It was always that kind of thing where I just felt like I was on the outside or the fringes of all the friendship groups. So it was difficult. Yeah, it was a lonely time for sure. Like, not really feeling like you fit in with your family or your friends. It's difficult. It's a really lonely time.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because people hear the word lonely
Mm,
and they think like visually or physically isolated. But like where I resonate with that is like similar to yourself. I had lots of different clusters of friends, um, but I always felt like I was just literally on the outskirts of that friendship. I was just the one on the sidelines,
yeah,
the one who always like that the token gesture in the group that people brought along.
yeah,
But I always used to retreat back to the misfits. There used to be a little group of misfits who
yeah,
used to be a classroom called A1, and they'd play chess and they'd
yeah,
read books and they'd be a bit geeky. And in the day, I'm out pretending to be this absolute male stud because I was very closeted then as well.
yeah,
And then by night, I'm playing chess. It was just this, but then I always felt at peace just with the odd bods and the misfits. I was like, this is my home. It's
yeah.
mad.
Yeah, like you say, it's not a physical loneliness where you're actually alone. It's just that you don't feel seen, you don't feel included, you don't feel like people wanted you there. It's like I'm just here because people happen to know me, and I might have been around when they were making plans, but it's not something where you're
Yeah.
actively brought into the situation.
And I think like someone said to me years ago, and it's a saying that stuck with me. They said like that's not my chair, and I didn't understand it, and then they explained it. There was like there's chairs everywhere, and you can sit in it if you want, but if you're not meant to occupy it, you're never gonna find comfort in that seat. Like it was
Yeah.
never meant for you to sit there. And I
Mm.
was like, that just makes so much. Like I had a seat in many groups, but I never fully relaxed into any. I was a flitter,
Yeah.
and I think for me it showed in my birthday party, like my 18th. There was like 250 people there. 21st, 200. 30th, about 150. If I had a party now, I could have it in a McDonald's. Like I'm
Yeah.
that comfortable with my like I don't need that big circle, but I used to need validation all the time.
Mm.
So going back then 2 years ago, so what is your journey with discovering your neurodivergence? How did that come about for you? Because it's shaped your life massively in the last 2 years, and kind of the
Yeah.
angle everything's gone in. But
Yeah.
what was the starting point for you then?
So, like a lot of people, I'd been dealing with what looked like anxiety and depression for quite a long time. So that originally started getting quite bad at university, but through learning about it and seeing what that was like, it's like, oh, I've always been a very anxious, like hypervigilant person. I've definitely gone through bouts of depression, but university was where it really reached like a tipping point, and that was going on for quite a few years. And I started looking into persistent anxiety and depression. Like, why is that something that's still happening? Like, is there other things that cause persistent anxiety and depression? Is it trauma? What is it? And that's when I started seeing things about ADHD and starting to read papers and articles about how the symptoms of ADHD, when unmanaged, look very much like anxiety and depression. So I started doing a lot more reading around it and started following people online. And I ended up taking a lot of the online screening tests, and they all came back as like moderate to severe symptoms. So I started the referral process, and I didn't know about right to choose when I first got referred. So I was on the NHS waiting list for nearly 2 years, and I was like, I can't wait anymore. So I ended up booking a private one and got diagnosed a few months later, and went from there really. And yeah, here we are.
What did that? Because again, it's a common thing, and I have this. I have this little kind of niggle and bugbear, like women are massively underrepresented, and we know the reasons why. But I also, in my gut, I feel that there's a cluster of men who are kind of hidden under toxic masculinity, who are dealing with this. You've depressed, you've got anxiety, you've got high function this and all that, but because they never rear their head above, they're never kind of seeing their potential. What did it look like? What did anxiety and depression look like for you? How did it present?
Mm. So the anxiety side of things, I obviously it was the really racing thoughts, it was the catastrophizing, it was that constant feeling of impending doom. But I got a lot of physical symptoms as a result of all this as well. So I used to get really twitchy muscles. I'd be getting loads of random aches, pains, sciatica. Like I got all sorts because my nervous system was just in overdrive all the time. So my body was really hypersensitive to a lot of things. And I get eczema anyway, but I'd have like really bad, persistent bouts of like widespread eczema where my whole body would be covered. So it was my whole body was just in like fight or flight all the time, and that was showing up as that sort of overreaction or hyper reaction to a lot of physical things. And the depression, it was exactly what you'd expect. It was just this persistent like loss of joy. Wasn't necessarily a sadness. It was at times, but it was just this hopelessness. What's the point? Like there's literally nothing good that I can find about my life, and I can predict how bad every day is going to feel because it's just this same loop over and over and over again. So it was a really rough time, and I did end up in a really bad place with it at one point. So yeah, it was a really rough time. It was like that for several years, I think, like up and down, but persistently at the lower point of what you'd consider your mental health to be. And yeah, there was times when I thought I wasn't really going to be here anymore, and a couple of
Yeah,
times
I
when
hear that, mate.
I
I
very
hear that.
nearly wasn't. So yeah, it did get very bad at some point, and that's why I talk about these things so much, because when it is unmanaged and when it is unsupported, like it's not just that you're going to struggle a bit more in day-to-day life. Like you might reach crisis point very easily if,
Yeah.
if things keep going that way.
And I have kind of like my thoughts on it is, if you're talking about it and somebody feels uncomfortable about you talking about it, then that's the person that needs to hear it.
Yeah.
Because and especially like with the way in which our minds can be, and the intrusive thoughts and the extremities, and like I've brought it together that my brain's just got this fuck it button in the middle of it, and when my brain can't take any more, it presses the fuck it button, and the thoughts are like, I genuinely used to think I was like schizophrenic, and I thought if I
Mm,
spoke about it, I'm going to get locked up here, because the only way I could describe it was voices in my head. I hadn't discovered the monologue thing. And
yeah.
I think it was one of your and Nush's posts where you spoke about the voices in your head, and it was described as a monologue. And I was like, that changes how I view the voices in my head, because
Yeah.
it's not like I'm hearing voices. It's just the voices don't stop.
Yeah.
It's constant.
Yeah, it's my internal voice, my cognitive voice. And when you've got a hyperactive mind that thinks a lot more than other people's, and you've got an internal monologue that works like that, it does feel like you're just being talked to constantly, and it comes from so many different angles. It can definitely make you feel like you're going crazy at times.
I used to think it was my mum's fault, because my mum was one of them people who would literally see danger in anything, and she would try and, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I don't think it helped, but I
Mm,
used to think my mum was just constantly like them voices of firing up. This negative's going to happen, that could happen, this could happen.
hmm
But I realise it's just my brain trying to foresee anything that could possibly happen wrong
Yeah.
because I don't want it to, because I know the impacts of what could go wrong.
Yeah. It's
And
like
it,
pattern recognition, and I suppose when you are around people that are maybe a bit overbearing at times, or they're overly critical, or they're always warning you about something, that internal monologue, it does start to become more of an anxious monologue because you're constantly reminded by external stuff that there's potential threat here. What about that? What about that? So it becomes less about pattern recognition and like commentary, and it's more like worry, worry, worry. You've got to be careful, and it does become more of a, like you say, a survival type thing, a self protection type thing.
and how have you found that since getting diagnosed? Have you made friends with the monologue more? Have you managed to put strategies and systems in place to try and manage it more? Because it's never going to go. It's always going to be there in some form.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I've spoke about this before in terms of like task paralysis, for example. I've started externalizing, so I'm vocally monologuing my life instead of just internally, because I think when you've got this build up of internal energy and it does just turn into a lot of thoughts, you do start to get overwhelmed because there's only so much you can keep up with, and if your brain's firing off too much, like you say, there's the fuck it button where you're just going to start meltdowning. So I actually externalize it quite a lot, where I talk myself through the things that I'm doing, and I do that as a way of sort of slowing myself down, where it's like, yes, there's a lot of different thoughts going on, but like I'm going to pick my next one and say it out loud, and we'll just focus on that a little bit for now, and then we'll get that done. We'll vocalize the next bit and we'll move on again. So I've found that it's become less overwhelming, and medication has been a big part of that, where it's not made my thoughts go silent like a lot of people say, but I find it a lot easier to kind of zone in on the ones that I need. So there is still background noise, but it's a lot easier to say, but I'm focusing on this right now, so what's my next thought about that? So yeah, it's gotten a lot easier, and you know, like everybody, I can get overwhelmed and I can find it a lot more challenging, but a lot of the time it's because I'm tired, or I've not eaten, or I've not been resting enough, or there's other stresses going on that are impacting me. So I think as you kind of work through and you start finding new skills, and you can kind of learn to recognize what's actually just part of the ADHD, you start to accept it a little bit. And I think the self acceptance is a massive part of kind of healing and recovering and growing after the diagnosis, where you start to understand that's just part of how my brain works.
Did you find um, you went a bit too far the other way when you first got diagnosed? Because I kind of went from everything affecting me to literally I did not give a shit about anyone, anything, or anyone or anything happening around me at all. And
Mm,
I initially became quite selfish, and I think it was like a self-preservation. It wasn't an intentional thing,
mm,
but I just kind of blocked off and I didn't care. And I was aware of it. I kept saying to people, like, I know I'm too far over here, but this is where I need to be,
mm.
because being over here is protecting me. And in protecting me, I'm allowing growth and healing to happen for me.
Yeah. Well, it's like equilibrium, isn't it? Like you go from, everything affects you, and it's generally because you care a lot more about everything that's going on around you than you do yourself. So I think, so that you can get to a happy medium where I'm caring equally about myself, and I know that I need to look after that, but I do still care about all of this. I think you do need to let yourself get to a point where you become a little bit selfish, because it's like I've put everyone else's needs and everyone else's comfort first for decades. So like it is time for me now. And yeah, I definitely got to that point probably quite early on, sort of during that kind of grieving process, where it's like,
Yeah,
I don't care
that's
what's going
where
on around me
I'd
right
say
now.
mindset.
I need to think about me. I need to look after me. And, that's a necessary part of that healing journey, where you actually start to recognize that you're a person, you matter, your needs matter, your feelings matter. And I need to prioritize that for a while. And when you have, that's when you can start to come out of that place where it's like, right, I know that I need to be looking after myself, so I'm more conscious of the impact things will have on me, and I do care about you, so I will do what I can, but I need to look after myself at the same time. So yeah, that's kind of how you start beginning setting boundaries and learning not to overface yourself. So I think it's a normal and a really necessary spot to find yourself in, I think.
Did you find people around you who were used to I don't want to say old Chris, like the pre-diagnosis Chris, really struggled with the shift in how you were setting boundaries.
Definitely. I think that's something that's still going on now, and I'm still kind of trying to work my way through. Like, pre-diagnosis, my impulsivity was something that made me more likable to a lot of people. Like, I was the guy that, yeah, of course I'll have another shot, of course I'll get that, of course I'll do that, of course I'll do that stupid thing if it's going to make you all laugh. Like, I don't care. And I think I'm a lot less like that now, so people probably find me a little bit more boring than I used to be, and I don't give as much as I used to, in that sense, where, I'm not here to provide you with entertainment anymore. Like, I'm here to enjoy your company. And, I think some people have maybe found that a little bit challenging and maybe not as desirable, which I can understand, because it probably was a lot of fun being around someone like that. But they didn't see the other side of it, which was I was actually suffering, and that's why I was doing those things. So, I'm not mad at people or disappointed or like let down by any of that, because
Mm.
I think that's just a big ADHD thing. Like, I constantly see both sides of everything that's going on. So I find it quite hard to be kind of annoyed or disappointed in people now, because I already see their point of view. So yeah, it's been challenging, but it's something where I'm kind of making peace with it now that, I've got people around me that do understand, people that have gotten to know this version of me, and they're still sticking around, and that's fine. If other people do join me in that process at some point, that's great, but I know not everyone will.
And I think with it as well, like one of my biggest learning curves with it is those people that kind of put you in that place where you're going to provide the entertainment, you're going to be the one that brings the laugh, you're going to bring this, you're going to do that. Like the funniest thing I've ever done is go, I'm not doing that today. I tell you what, I won't do that today. You do it. And they
Yeah.
just go, no, but that's not what I do. You
That's
do
not my
that.
role.
Yeah, and you realize how and it's nobody's fault. It's like
Mm,
if you're part of a group, naturally as a pack, you each have different roles, and you
yeah.
create these friendship groups, and you go, that's the silly one, that's the empathetic one, that's the one who will be best if you've had a like, and naturally that happens.
Yeah.
But when you rock that structure and you're like, I'm no longer sat there anymore, they're just like, you no longer, where do you fit? And
Yeah. What
it's
what do the
hard.
rest of us do now?
Yeah, like who's going to make us laugh? Who's going to get the shots in? But you
That's
get the
it.
shots in and learn some jokes yourself.
Yeah.
You mentioned just about medication and stuff like that. Um, I'm not there yet in
Mm,
relation to medication, just based on time frames and wait times. So it's something I am very kind of lacking personal experience of and stuff
mm,
like that. And I think you said something which is really relevant earlier, relating to not everybody has that moment, not everybody has that flip of a switch. Some people do, which is fantastic. Other
mm,
people have to build up, and actually, um, that's one thing that kind of sits as a worry for me. Like, what if I don't get anything
mm.
from it? So, what's been your experience with medication, and how did you find that journey, and how does it help you now?
Yeah. So I waited a few months before I started, because I wanted to let myself digest the diagnosis. I wanted the dust to settle a little bit. I didn't want to jump straight in and add this new sort of challenge straight away. So I waited a few months, and I got really lucky in that the first medication I started, Elvance, lisdexamfetamine, it's called various things, but that's the one that I started on. I started off on 10 milligrams and really slowly built up. So I didn't have the big like whack. Here's this massive amount of stimulant for you. Um, and yeah, I never got that moment where it's like, oh, my thoughts have gone quiet, and oh, this isn't difficult at all anymore. Like, it makes things way easier, but there's still things I've needed to put in place, like the vocalization when I'm struggling with things. I've still had to find my little hacks to help myself along. And I think throughout the conversations that I've had with people, a lot of people say, oh, the medication's just not helping me, like it's not done anything. And then you ask what they're eating, you ask how well they hydrate, you ask what they do after work, you ask about their sleep and all these lifestyle factors, and then people like they're surprised that the medication isn't going to work as much if you're not actually fueling yourself, because it's almost like you've given yourself this massive nitro boost, but then you're not topping up the oil as you go, so it's bound to run out eventually and you're not going to get as much out of it. So it has been massively helpful for me, but it's definitely just another tool in the box.
Yeah, someone just put Sly hydration remind for Paul. Absolutely. You mentioned it. I was
That's all
like,
about. I was like,
oh
good
yeah,
luck.
it's probably warm now, but I've got a drink there. And I think with that as well, like, I think there are different types of people, and people are that way for their own reasons. But there's people that look upon medication as a miracle cure, and it's not like anybody that is going to have sustained benefit from medication. You've got to be listening to yourself. You've got to be learning about yourself. You've got to be understanding yourself more, because all that is, I kind of see it as like a walking aid. If my legs were knackered, I'd have a frame.
Yeah,
I still know how to walk, but I've got a frame. But then I've got to learn to walk again. And it's
that's
kind
it.
of that's the way I see it for me. I want to know what it's like off it, on it, and then be able to make that informed decision. And like, there's so many people that are, and you hear them, and I understand why people are desperate for medication. I'm ridiculously keen to try it,
Yeah,
but if you are somebody that's waiting to start medication, don't wait to start medication before you start learning, because although I would have much rather had it 12 months ago when I was diagnosed, actually looking at it now, I've learned so much more about myself in the last 12 months.
yeah.
I've learned for me that like autism is extremely likely. I'm almost at the end of that process of
Mhm.
diagnosis, and if I hadn't have learned that, I think I would have had a rude awakening when it came to medication, because that, I'm being told, when you're on medication, your inner chaos from your autism is going to present more, because actually something's calming the ADHD external chaos.
Yeah,
And I don't think I'd have coped with that if I hadn't had the opportunity to build the knowledge and understanding.
that's amazing, mate. That's it. You know, you can always think that it might be something better, but a lot of the time you look back and it's like, oh, I'm kind of glad that it's panned out the way that it has.
Mm.
Like me when I moved to Ireland, you know, I couldn't get hold of my medication, so it was like only a month ago that I actually managed to get them again. And in that time, if I'd had the medication, I probably wouldn't have had the reminder of I need to be looking at my diet. I need to be making sure I'm hydrated. I need to look at how I'm going about my tasks. I need to make sure I'm exercising and fueling myself. Like, I wouldn't have learned those things if I had the medication, because it can make me a little bit complacent where it's like I'm quite happy to just stay at my desk for 9, 10 hours because I'm enjoying my work and I'll forget about all those things. But if I had the medication the whole time, then that probably would have been 4 months of coasting by like that. And then you do eventually hit a kind of crisis point, I suppose, where it's like, oh, my body's reminding me that I'm not really looking after myself right now. So, you know, we can see something as though it's going to be a negative situation, but you don't really know that until you get towards the next kind of event or something like that. So it's all about keeping the onward growth the main focus, and what can I learn about myself? How can I keep providing myself with lessons as I go?
And it's a cliche word, the whole growth thing, and like it's still a word that makes me cringe, but I can't think of a better word for it. Like, it is growth, like, but it's you've got to sit with yourself in your most organic, authentic place
Yep.
to really learn how you move forward and what's going to help you. And like, having that time off medication has probably had a bit of a reset for you, as you say.
Yeah.
It's realigned where the work you've done beforehand.
That's it. That's it. That's exactly how I see it as well. You know, it was an opportunity for me to go back to sitting with myself, as you're saying. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I can sit in silence on my own, surrounded by all this beautiful nature that I find myself in now, and I can start asking myself some important questions again without judging myself and thinking, you know, well, why haven't I been doing that, or why am I focusing on that, and what could I maybe put my efforts to in a different way to look after myself more. And you know, we cringe at the word growth, but that's what it is. It doesn't mean that you're starting to see yourself as superior to anybody. It's just that I'm growing into a new version of myself and kind of expanding what I am, and that's going to take time.
And I think it is. It's like the reason I cringe at the words is because of a prejudice almost I had, or this, like, I'd look at people who were doing what I used to be considered hippie shit, when actually now I'm occupying a different space. I look and I go, no, 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 they're just putting their self and well-being first.
Yep.
So now I understand it more. Whereas when I was younger, and it might be an age thing, it might just be where he was, but it's still like you kind of go, oh, I don't want to talk about growth because it's cringe, but that's exactly what it is. You do develop in that.
You do?
Um, you mentioned earlier the grief when you got diagnosed, and I think this is a massive one, that I see a lot of people kind of asking about because their experiences, and I think for me, a lot of guilt sat with the grief cycle. I felt selfish because I had these opinions, and I felt like I should be feeling elated and a sustained elation, but actually, what it kick-started was something I wasn't prepared for. How
Yeah.
did that kind of work for you? Then, what was that grief cycle that you experienced?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. I don't think many of us are. And I think when you first get the diagnosis, me anyway, I felt elation, I felt relief, I felt validated. It was like, oh my God, I'm seen, and this explains so much of the things that I've struggled with throughout my life. But that lasted for maybe a few days, and then the reality started sinking in that, like, oh, this explains so many things from my life. And that's when you start reflecting on issues that you had at home, issues you had with friends, issues you had at school, and you start piecing it all together, going, oh, that was because I'm ADHD. That's because I'm neurodivergent. That's why I always felt that way, and that's why I struggled with that. So it soon gets replaced by a lot of reflection and kind of picking your life apart and recognizing where you've not had the support that you need, and you've been treated in a way that was massively counterproductive to your development. And it was a really, really difficult time. I definitely wasn't ready for it, and I'd go so far as saying that I definitely ended up depressed again. Like, I was in a really
But
bad way. I was in a really bad way for quite a while because it was such a shell shock. You know, you expect it to be this really positive experience, which it is, but part of that positive experience is kind of going back to source and piecing these things together and kind of forgiving yourself and other people, because I didn't know this thing about myself. They definitely didn't know this thing about myself. The world was a different place then. So even though it is very painful, it's almost like a cocoon that you go into for a time where you're starting to nurse those old wounds, and that's what lets it become a positive process over time. But I think it's a really necessary part of the journey for people to actually go back and feel all that hurt again.
and I think it's potentially something that needs to be spoke about more, because the more one-to-one chats I have with people, there's a real theme of this cycle. And like for me, what had happened is I'd engaged in TikTok. I'd gone from being the observer to the creator. I was informing as I'd go, and I was building up a persona. And gradually, bit by bit, it wasn't false, but actually there was a point where I personally started going down. But then I put on the showman more. I'm used to that. Outside of the comedy, I host drag shows. I do, like, I'm in that field, so I'm used to just going smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
But it was strange because I didn't feel like I could admit to people that actually, whilst the world thought I was going that way, I was crashing. I'd started drinking more. I was making poor decisions.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking after myself. I was detaching from stabilized circles because I got extremely close to depression again,
Yeah.
and it was hard to accept that I'd got something I'd been seeking for so long. I'd got some validation, but actually I wasn't ready to cope with what validation meant.
Yeah.
Um, it's that perception in it. You've got what you wanted. Shut up now and get on with it. But actually, it just comes, it takes you out.
It does. I mean, the diagnosis, it's the tip of the iceberg. Like,
It's a starting point, isn't it? It's not the end goal.
journey. It's just the beginning, and it does start a real roller coaster of events and circumstances that you're going to find yourself in. And I was very open about that, and I think that's part of the reason that the stuff I talked about resonated with a lot of people was it was a very vulnerable thing to share. I was quite embarrassed about sharing it. I was scared about sharing it, but it did me a lot of good because, again, like, we shouldn't look for external validation, but whenever I'd post something about that grieving period and how much I was struggling, there'd be other people. I went through this. I'm going through this. It's going to get better. We all know we'll get there. And it was that real community support where, I'm not going through that on my own, and there's a lot of people that have had the same or having the same, and we all just need to keep talking about it and showing that it's okay, so we can slowly work through that process.
Yeah, and I think time is important.
Mm,
Because I had it recently, and I'd said in a video, like, I've supported a lot of people through Right to Choose.
mm,
And just based on circumstance, a lot of people have gone through quicker, they're getting medication. But because I was with Psych UK and they've got such this backlog, I'm still waiting. And
mm,
I started to feel this animosity and frustration towards, and it wasn't a them thing, it was absolutely nothing to do with them.
yeah,
And I had to really, really check myself and just go, you're playing your own game, because it's so easy to observe everybody else
yeah.
and go back to that place where you're measuring yourself against somebody else.
Hmm. Definitely. It's,
So,
it's it's a difficult thing though when you're involved with social media,
mm,
and you do fall into these ruts of comparing yourself to other people, and why am I not at that point? Why have they got that but I haven't? And I think that's just the way social media is set up. So it's easy to end up in those places. But good on you for recognizing it and being able to reflect
and it
and
was in a chat with Greg. Me and Greg were talking, I was just saying, like, I had to really, and I think everybody, some points, like, go back to your why. What is your why?
yeah.
Because the why is often where the best intent sits, not where you aim to be, why you started where you wanted to be.
Hmm.
And I think it can be really grounding with social. And I think relation to socials, it links quite nicely into how Chris has become social Chris, social media Chris.
Mm.
So how did that start? Did you come into this world thinking that you wanted to kind of create content to move forward and it was a space you wanted to occupy, or did it just kind of happen? Like, talk us through that.
So I actually started on social media about 4 years before I got diagnosed, and I was talking about general mental health, anxiety, depression, because that's what I was experiencing at the time. So I originally started that because I was working in the NHS as a physio, and I was going through this mental health problem. I was like, how can I do something to help other people and to try process this, because I didn't really have a creative outlet, and I didn't have any hobbies at that time because I was in such a bad place. So I turned to going online and sharing things to try and put a positive spin or a positive direction on what I was going through. And that started out as just resharing things that I'd found inspiring or motivating. And over time, I started making my own stuff. And when I got diagnosed, that was when I started up on TikTok. I hadn't been using it before then, but it was somewhere where I'd been watching a lot of other people. It was a proper neurodivergent safe space at that time, I think. So I started using TikTok at that stage, and yeah, that's kind of where everything went. It was from start to now, just documenting the whole process, the whole journey, what I'd learned, things I was struggling with, things I'd managed to get better with, and yeah, I've really grown through doing that because I think it helped me to get rid of a lot of shame that I carried around myself and my diagnosis. Like, it's almost like developing a bit of thicker skin, if I'm able to put this out to the masses and not care what people think, and I can get past the negative comments and trolls. Like, that was a big part of my growth in terms of accepting myself for all of who I am, because that's out in the world for everyone to see, and I needed to stop caring about what people thought. So it was a big part of helping me get to where I am now, I think.
Have you found that you've learned from yourself? And what I mean by it is, because, like, I am terrible at processing things here. But
Mm,
I've found sometimes when I've done a bit of a knee jerk piece of content, or I've kind of put out how I'm feeling and I've articulated it to the camera,
yeah.
watching it back and objectively viewing somebody saying it, even though it's me, I find it so beneficial to help me to process and understand. Because
Yep.
sometimes I just open my mouth and a trail of thought have come out, and I'm not comprehending what's coming out.
Yeah.
It's just this train of thought, and then watching it back, like, kind of helps.
Definitely. No, I'm massively like that. Sometimes the video that I put out, it might be the second or third time that I run through something because I'll have something that I'm feeling that I can't quite verbalize or I can't quite get it right in my head yet. So I'll start filming because it's almost like, I'm documenting the processing of what I'm feeling and thinking right now, and then it's like, oh yeah, I can see how that's starting to turn into a story now. Like, how can I make that applicable to other people? So it's a way of me processing. It's a way of me cementing what I'm feeling and letting go of what I'm feeling sometimes. So it's a major outlet for me. And over time, I've tried to make that a bit less about me and a bit more about, how can I put this across to people that I know are going to be dealing with something similar. So yeah, it's that kind of process for me in terms of understanding what I'm going through and then trying to put it across in a way that people might find helpful.
Yeah, and like in a twist and turn of events, you doing what you were doing has it's effectively totally changed the direction of everything for yourself, hasn't it?
Massively, massively. Yeah, when
So
I got
how did
diagnosed.
that start out? So you're creating this content, you're getting the traction, you're getting people on. I know there was a point when you pulled back and you give yourself some space as well, which would be good to chat about in a bit if you're happy to, because I think it's important that that is
Yeah,
okay as well. So
there's
this
been several
momentum.
times that I've pulled back actually. You get to a point where I'm focusing too much on the numbers, the RSD's going mad every time I post a video, and like it's just not doing me any good, even though I'm trying to help other people. It's become a bit too much about me and what I'm interpreting from, the algorithms will say. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's something that it's massively changed my life. So when I first started posting about my diagnosis, I was still working as a physio in the NHS, and that was in a really pulled back format. Like I wasn't working in a clinic, I wasn't working full time. It was like a triage role from home, and that suited me a lot better because it gave me the time to actually recover. So I wasn't dealing with burnout. It meant that I could still take care of my home and engage with friendships and my partner. So yeah, the traction built quicker than I would have expected it to, and over time, I think people started noticing, and then Josh, who's the CEO of Neurobridge, he'd been watching my content for quite a while, and then it was Nush that told me that he was wanting to speak to me about potentially working there. So I had a bit of an informal meeting slash interview with him, and he saw from my content that the stuff I was putting out was accurate, and he saw that I'd been consistent with something, and it was like a personal goal of mine to keep helping people, and especially because I didn't do it in a way where I was making any money or sort of doing too many brand deals or anything like that. It was quite an appeal to him to maybe have me on board. So that's how I ended up over at Neurobridge instead. So I started there at the beginning of 2024, and yeah, we'll expand on that in a minute, I'm sure. But that's the the
Yeah,
rough process.
absolutely. And along the way, so obviously you're gonna you're going to have had a lot of people trying to reach out and trying to have a little part of Chris and to try and occupy some space based on your content and stuff. How did you manage that? Because your numbers went quite quickly, and
Mm,
actually the growth of your pages and your presence and stuff went quickly. How did you manage that process? Because we can be guilty of wanting to help everybody. I think especially when it's people who are occupying a space where we used to be, we want
mm,
everybody to feel that little bit of forward that we've had.
yeah.
How did you manage that? Because it must have been tough, because there's no way you could have possibly helped everybody.
That's it, and I think that's a big lesson that you have to learn is that you can't help everybody because not everyone's in a place where they really want the help. They know they need it, but they don't necessarily want to be helped. They maybe want to be fixed. They want to be supported, and there's only so much of that that you can do through words on a screen. So it was kind of making peace with the fact that I'm not a bad person because I'm not doing everything for everybody, and it was letting go of that people pleasing mentality. Like when I first started posting, sorry, it was definitely like,
Posing. You've just
oh.
let yourself up there. It's like, hi, I'm Happiness and Movement. Nice to meet you.
But yeah, when I first started posting, it was quite easy to fall into the realms of like, I'm going to make sure I reply to every single comment, and I'll post video replies as often as I can, and I'll answer every DM that I get. And I only have so much capacity, and you mentioned me taking breaks from it. That was because I got to a point where it's like I'm prioritizing everyone over myself, and it's starting to impact my life. But it's not selfish to know that my life needs to be the most important thing in that equation. Like, part of my life is doing these things to help as many people as possible, but that can't become the main priority or the biggest priority, because as soon as it does, something else slips where I'm maybe not engaging with my partner or my friends, or my work isn't being done the way it needs to be done. So it was a process over time of several breaks that I started
It's
recognizing that,
hard because it
yeah,
feels good helping people.
it does.
It is one of the most dopamine rich things when you know you've aided somebody to
Yeah,
move forward or just made a short impact. It, and it's addictive, but actually when the mirror's fully looking out and not looking in, you're then becoming the vulnerable person. And like nobody can lean on you full stop if you're broke. And
that's it. That's
it's
it.
hard to pull away, but I think it's great that you acknowledge that and you've seen that and you've done it on multiple occasions, just where you've gone, I need to sit back a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think now that I'm working in the neurodiversity space, it's been a lot easier to not feel pressured to always be posting and always being active online, because like every single day of the week now I'm doing work that is for that purpose.
Mhm.
So it's allowed content to be that hobby again, where it is just a side project and the numbers don't matter anymore. If something does well, that's great. If it doesn't, it's fine. I've enjoyed making it, and it's been nice seeing that happen over the last 6 months or so, where I
You've
don't I
got your
don't have to
spark
be.
back in your videos.
Yeah.
You've got like you've got your authentic glow back, and I think that shows like in content you're creating now. It's authentic, it's you, it's thought provoking, and I've loved seeing it since you've come back. It's been really good to
Cheers,
see.
mate. No,
But
it feels good, you know. Like I posted something on Threads the other day about how I will create when I feel creative, because there's not a need for it anymore. Like I'm not doing it to validate myself. I'm not doing it because I want to be accepted. Like I've had a thought that I thought might turn into something quite good, so I feel creative right now. But an as and when thing now, so there's no pressure around surrounding it anymore, which is it's been quite freeing actually.
and you mentioned work being a massive part in this freedom, and like you are literally dedicating your career, which what a beautiful space to be, where you can go and earn money to live your life, but you're doing it in a way in which is giving you what you want from it. What is Neurobridge? Talk us through it. What's the company? What's it about? What's your role?
Yeah, so Neurobridge was set up to help organizations implement more comprehensive support for neurodiversity. We spend so much of our time in work environments, and most of them are not set up to properly support neurodivergent people. They don't understand working preferences and accommodations and learning styles. So we work with organizations to help educate them on what neurodiversity is, how these conditions actually present, how it might impact a person's work and their relationships. So my role personally, I work one to one with neurodivergent individuals. So there's a lot of coaching involved. I've made a lot of the educational content that we have online that goes out to clients, workshops, policies, marketing, sales. There's all sorts that I get stuck into. So it's amazing for my brain being able to work in so many different areas, because if something's not quite giving me the dopamine buzz that I need, I can go to something else and come back to it. So it's really nice, and it's given me a proper sense of freedom where I'm trusted to go about my work, and the results speak for themselves in terms of how it's impacted me, how it then feeds into the business and the people we work with. So Yeah, it's been amazing. I still find myself pinching myself sometimes, like I'm bound to wake up in a minute, but it's not happened
Yeah,
yet. So.
that's the imposter, and it's always
Yeah.
that imposter's always going to sit there like, have I blagged this? Have I winged this?
Yeah.
But but ultimately, like as you say, if like the proof's in the pudding, and you're getting that positive feedback, you're creating things that make impact, and like what a great space to be. And I think a lot of people kind of want to do something within the space, and I think the fact that you've been able to, and you've showed that there are roots into it, not easy, you've put
Yeah.
the graft in, it's not been
Yeah.
handed to you on a plate. Like ultimately you had a 2-year interview on TikTok without
Yeah.
even
Pretty
knowing it.
much.
You were being interviewed through your content.
Yeah.
But no, it's great, and I'm so glad that there are people like yourself representing a community and supporting a community, because I think you are a great advocate, you are a great example, and I think there's a lot of people that are really going to take and benefit from everything you've put into working on yourself as well. And I think the fact that you're passing that forward is credit to you, mate. Like hats off.
Thanks, mate. This is where the inability to accept a compliment's going to come
Yeah,
across,
yeah.
but it means a lot.
Yeah. Oh, is that the time?
Oh shit, gotta go.
So last two questions then.
Yeah, that.
So if there were 3 top tips that you could give to any neurodivergent individual that could potentially help them in their life, what would that be? What would your top 3 tips be?
So I think my biggest one that's quite broad is to let yourself zoom out a little bit. It can be very easy to get stuck focusing on problems, potential solutions, symptoms, traits, but you're not your diagnosis, you're you. So let yourself zoom out and see your life for the expansive thing that it is. It can be easy, especially in the early days after a diagnosis, to really hone in on the fact that this is a big part of me and I need to focus everything on that. But you still have a life to live outside of it, and it's okay to not be focusing on progress and self-development. Like it's okay to just be sometimes. So let yourself zoom out. Self-acceptance is another big one, and I think that's been one of the biggest things for me, is accepting that this is how my brain works, and some things will be more challenging if I'm doing them in the wrong ways or if I'm in the wrong kind of environment. That's just the way it's going to be. We can't change the fundamental makeup of our brain, and we can run into a lot of problems when trying to be something that we're not. That's what the mask is, after all. It's you trying to be something that isn't natural to who you are. So let yourself be who you are. Number 3, community. That's been a massive part of the journey as well, and I found that community through doing this. But speaking to people and having relationships with people who know what it's like from their own lived experience, that's massive in terms of, 1, being a bit more compassionate to yourself, and 2, actually finding ways to be a human being that work more for you, because we've been raised not knowing these massive things about ourselves, and that's why we've had so much difficulty, because we're trying to be like everybody else, but we're not. So it's okay to share lived experiences with people that have been there and find ways that are going to work, even if they are more unconventional, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And I think that last one, I think we are known for oversharing, but if there ever is a case where oversharing's okay, and not a trauma dump
Yeah,
overshare, but an experience overshare, it's that something amazing happens when you articulate something to somebody else, and you just know that they've received it and understood it. They've
yeah,
not taken it on board and empathetically gone, oh, that must be terrible. They've gone, shit the bed, I get it.
yeah.
And it's just
I've been
like,
there. I know
oh,
that. Yeah,
it's that feeling when you just go, my people, my
yeah.
people.
I found my tribe.
Yeah.
The acceptance that you get and the validation you get from that, I think that's a massive part of that healing process, and actually getting to a point where you can start growing, is because you lose the shame and the guilt that you've carried around from not being able to say that out loud, because people don't get it and they're going to judge you. But people in this space do get it, they've lived it, they're living it every day. So it's okay to be open about those things, and lose a little bit of that weight that we're holding on to.
Yeah, and I think with in that process when you're learning from others as well, I think a lesson I learned early on, which I was glad I learned, is that like we are all anyone within the community is neurodivergent, but that doesn't mean that our footprint's the same. And I think there was a certain time when I was first exploring it where I'd see content that I didn't relate to, but I'd try and rack my brain to make myself go, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was because in my head I thought if I didn't qualify against every single person's every experience,
Yeah,
it then invalidated my own footprint of neurodiversity
yeah,
and being neurodivergent. Um, but like now, I just look and I go, do you know what? This is a massive ball pit of
yeah,
symptoms, experiences, and
yeah,
we're all jumping in the same ball pit, and we're all grabbing as many balls that we need to, and we
yeah.
might have some that are the same, but we're not all going to have the same. There's too many balls in that pit for us to all occupy. But
Absolutely.
actually, we're all in that ball pit together.
Yeah.
Like and it is the beautiful thing I've found from community is that whereas in society I've found a lot of people want to run ahead, they want to be in front, they want to be the trendsetters, they want to be the people that are shining above.
Mm.
The most humbling experience from the neurodivergent community is that I really feel that they will walk next to you,
We're walking
they will
together. We're not running
stand
away.
side by side, and they will walk forward with you.
Yeah,
And I just think that feeling of people just having your back and being your stabilizers,
that's it.
it's so crucial to growing and accepting when you feel that you've got people that get you back.
That's it, pal. Instead of being an individual like egg and spoon race where we're doing as best to not drop
Mm,
things, it's like we're actually in like a three-legged race with people that get it. So we're actually just going at a
yeah,
pace that we can all match. And sometimes people are going to try run ahead and they'll fall over, and then the other people will catch up and we'll keep going together. So it's definitely a massive, massive community that we're all really lucky to be a part of. And social media has its downsides, but without it, I don't think a lot of us would be at the stage that we are. So it's been an amazing thing.
absolutely. And the last question is one that I ask everybody, and it's a reflective one, and I think I like go with it and say whatever you're comfortable to say with it. If you could go back and have a conversation with that younger Chris, that younger self, what would you say, and why would you say that?
Mm. I've been asked this before, and a lot of people might think that you'd go back and like tell them about the ADHD or about the upcoming diagnosis. Like, I don't think I would give anything away. I would just let him know that he is going to be okay and that things are going to work out and that they're going to be very difficult at times. But that difficulty is going to lead him to places that he never thought he was going to end up being, and being way happier and way more peaceful with himself than he ever would have imagined being. So don't sweat the difficult times too much because they're never going to last forever.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that, and I think for a lot of us, we never knew it, but the answer sat within us all the time. Like the answer sat within us, and everything that we struggled to get to where we are now through, it was because we were just destined to get to the answer. And there's peace in that settlement. I'm the same. I wouldn't tell myself about it at all
No,
because I don't think I'd be the person I am now if I had the
absolutely.
full toolkit. And I don't think
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have been able to use the toolkit either. If you'd have given it me when I was younger, I'd have just been like, "What's this? What's that?"
Yeah, what are you on about?
Um,
That's it. It's like
so
the difficulty really does shape us, and I think a big part of me being where I am now is accepting that there's a lot of necessary suffering that's going to happen in life, and you can resist that as much as you want, but there's still going to be something that makes you suffer. So you may as well just know that it's going to come and enjoy when it's not there. Know that it's going to end when it does start coming. So it's just part of life.
absolutely, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I've loved this, mate. Thanks for having
Um,
me on.
no, it's I like I say, you were. I said to you in a message, you're a guest. I think I would have liked to have had the fact that you agreed to it. I appreciate that a lot because I know TikTok lives and stuff are fresh for yourself. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking that time. Before we go, for anybody that's listening on pod platforms or on YouTube, where can people find you on socials? And if people wanted to look more into NeuroBridge for their company, how do
Yeah.
they go about that?
So you can find me personally. I'm on TikTok at Happiness in Movement 1, Instagram at Happiness in Movement because nobody had taken the username yet. And Neurobridge, you can find us on Instagram at Neurobridge HQ or LinkedIn. Just search Neurobridge, and that'll bring you there, and you'll be able to find the links to the website and everything from there. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Well, have a great evening. Thanks for
very
joining
much.
us.
You have a good one as
Take
well.
care of yourself,
Good
mate.
weekend. Take care. I'll chat to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers, pal.